In this video, I'm going to demonstrate how to use the animation property. So the animation property is a CSS property that allows us to make changes to an HTML element over time. And to do that, I want to first have the elements themselves. So I'm going to animate some words up here in this header section. So I'm going to add them. So I have access to them to be able to do it. Notice how I added each word with its own ID. If I refresh, then these show up like this, and this is not what I want in the end. One thing about an animation is you want to get a picture of what you want before you start, so you can get moving in that direction. I want these 4 words to start here, and I'm going to animate each word individually, and that's why I've made them individual. So to position them, my most effective way to position them is with absolute. Oh, here's my style. Notice that in my style sheet, I have created a style rule for all of them because there's many things that are going to be the same for each element, and then one for each of them individually. And that's where I will put the rules that are different for that particular word. And the ones that are the same for all of them, I'm going to put in here. Well, I want them all to be, I want to be able to position them using the absolute value. For that to work, I need to have an ancestor with the position set. If I don't have that, then it'll position it based on the HTML or the body section. And I don't want to position it that way. I want to position it relative to the header. So I'm going to set the position for header to relative. Now this will not make any change because I haven't put any top, bottom, left, or right. But it allows me to use absolute positioning based off of that. So I'm going to bring it from the top 180 pixels and from the left 380 pixels. All right, now let's see what happened to that. There they are. And notice I've piled them all on top of each other because that's where I want them to start from. And one thing that's important about when you're animating is that animations only last for a certain period of time. And as soon as the animation is over, the element will go back to exactly where it is, or where it started at. So both the start and the finish, the element is in the same space. And so you always want to design, you always want to start your elements where you want them to end after the after the animation. So I don't even want these to be visible before or after the animation. I don't want them to be visible. So I'm going to set the visibility to hidden. And that way they'll be there, but we won't see them. All right, so they're there at the beginning, but they're not visible. And this will work good for the animation that I want to do. And notice how I was able to set that for all 4 of those properties. Okay, to do an animation, you use the animation property, and I'm going to animate the words a little bit individually. So that's why the animation part is going to be different for each one. So in the animation, I'm going to have the first property that I want to put for the animation is the name of the keyframes. So to do an animation, you need to have another style block that is a keyframes style block. And here you give it a name, and you can call it whatever you want. I'm going to call this one flow. And then I'm going to say I want the animation for the learn word to call the flow keyframe. Okay. The next property I put is how long I want the animation to last. And I want this animation to last 2 seconds. And then there's other properties that you can add. But let's just start with those 2 for right now. So now the keyframes allow you to identify what you want to change over time. And the way you say when you want it to change is with a % here. So if I put 0%, that's going to identify what I want the change to be at the very beginning. And inside here I can put any style rules I want. And then I have to decide. You can go right from 0% to 100%. And then all you're doing is just saying what I want in the beginning and what I want at the end of the animation. Or you can put a whole bunch of different levels in here, and that gives you the ability to change it as you go. So I'm going to add a 20%, and 40%. And so I'm giving myself as much specific details as I want. How often do you want to make changes in this animation? And you can just add them to be whatever you want. And so this is about how much detail I'm going to want for these animations. I'm just going to put it at 20% intervals. All right, now inside here, then I can set whatever style properties I want to change. So first off, I want the visibility to change. So I want it to become visible right at the very beginning. And we can go see what this happens. So if I go here and I refresh, there it becomes visible. And it lasted 2 seconds and went away. That was the animation. It became visible and then it went away. So I know I want that to change right at the very beginning. The other thing I want to have do is I want some transform to happen. So a couple of things. I want it to translate, so I want it to move. I want it to move left 30 pixels, so I'm going to put negative 30 px. I want it to move up, so that's a negative as well, 50 pixels. And I want it to get bigger. So remember that with the transform property, you can change more than one value at a time, and you just simply put a space between it. So I want it to scale 1.3. So I want it to get a little bit bigger. So I'm going to do that, and notice it will make a change from 0% to 20%. And we can see that happen here. Okay, now watch what happened. It went in the first 20%, it went up to what we said, and then it slowly worked its way back to where it started. So it's always moving back to where it started. So if I want this to stay, then I can add it then I need to put it in all of it. And then it'll go up there and it'll stay, and after the 100% it'll go back to where it is. So I can just do that. It goes up there, now it stays, and then it goes away. Notice that when it goes away, what's it doing? It's going back to this where it was, visibility hidden, and if we could see it, it would be back in this position. All right, so what I want it to do is I want it to keep growing. So I'm going to be changing these. I want it to get bigger. And so I'm just going to have it get bigger as it goes along. Okay, so now we can watch it grow. And there it goes. Now notice, well, let's go ahead and do the translate because I want to translate it too. I want it to keep moving to the left, so I'm just going to make this a little bit bigger every time. And so I'm just changing it. So here I'm saying move left, move left, move left, move left, and I'm just moving it more every time. And then I can also say, okay, I want it to move up. So I go up to 100, 150, 200, and 250. Okay, so here I'm going left, 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 more, up and up more, and scaling it more too with each movement. So let's see what happens. All right, now do you see what it's doing? It's moving left and up, and it's getting bigger. Okay, so watch when we do this. Notice that jerking motion, and that is the transition timing function, and it's something that we can control. So it's set to automatically, it eases in, goes faster, and eases out. So it goes, the transition, it changes slow at first, then faster, then slow at the end. And that's what we're seeing, that jerky going back and forth. If we want that to be smooth, we can change that timing function to linear, and that means it's a constant change. So if we change that to linear, notice that's one of the values that I can add to the animation property. And then I get a smooth transition. So it's not going slow, fast, it's going the same speed the whole time. All right, so I'm changing that. There's some other things I want to change. I want to add a shadow to it. So to do this, I'm also going to add it in that property. I'm going to add it here, and these are going to start to get long, so I'm going to go ahead and put it on a second line. Notice I just put, if I want more than one property, that I end up with a semicolon. And now I'm going to change the shadow, and I'm going to add a text shadow. So I save that, and I go over here and I refresh, and there you see I've added that shadow. Now notice how it changes from no shadow, because that's what it started with, to a shadow at 20%, and then you can watch that shadow go away from 20% to 100% because it's working its way back to being gone. Right, because there it starts and there it goes away. So if I want that shadow to remain, then I'm going to have to keep it there on all of them. And I could just go ahead and keep it on the very last one, and that would maintain it as well, but I want to make changes to it in the middle. So there you see that going. Okay, now I'm going to add multiple shadows, and remember you can do that by adding a comma, and this is going to take a lot of typing, so I'm going to just copy paste this so you can see what it looks like, and then we'll talk about it. All right, so what I did is I added, at 20% I added a text shadow. At 40% I left that text shadow there and added another one. And then at 60% I left both of those two there and added a third, and then a fourth, and then a fifth. And let's go ahead and see what this does. We still keep our movement, but now we see these shadows being added as we animate that. So you can see that you can animate more than one property. You see that you can choose the timing property, and there are about 5 different timing properties, so you can look at those and see which one you want. You can identify how long you want it to last. If we change this to 4 seconds, then it's going to call the same keyframes, but it's going to do it over 4 seconds instead of over 2. So I can transition it how I want. And then at the end of the animation, it goes back to whatever properties it had in the beginning. So it goes back to this position, and it goes back to visibility hidden. Now I want to do that for each of these. I'm going to do them a little bit different. So for the 4 one, I want it to animate. I want to add an animation, and here again I need to create a keyframe, and since it's going to be different than the other one, then I'm going to create its own keyframes. And again, I can choose the name for it. I'm naming the keyframes flash, and so then I can, up here in the animation, I can call the flash, and this one I want it to be shorter, so I'm going to have it last 1 second. And I still want it linear, so I want that to be a smooth transition on the timing, but now I also want it to delay. So another property that I can add to animation is how much of a delay before it starts. And I want this to start after the first one, and so I want it to delay those 2 seconds. Okay, now we want to come down and build this keyframe, and I'm just going to paste it here for you so you can see what it's doing. I'm setting right away, I'm setting visibility to visible, and then I'm moving it. So here, and notice I'm not moving it as much as I did the other one, and I'm changing the scale, but not by as much. And so this is going to give me a different effect, and I'm not adding any shadow. So let's go see what happens here. So first we see the 2 second animation for learn, and then did you see it? We left our transition at 4 seconds, so let me change that back to 2 for the learn, and then the 4 for 1 second. So here goes that 2 second learn, and then 1 second 4. Okay. And that's how we build those animations. So I can go ahead and with A and lifetime do the same. Here's the keyframe that I'm going to use for A, and I'm going to call it sparkle. And notice this is very similar to the flash one, except it's moving to the right and up instead of the left and up, and scaling the same. So now to do that, I need to set the animation property for the A element to call sparkle. That's the keyframe it's going to call. I want it to last 1 second. I want it to use the linear timing function, and I want it to wait for 3 seconds so that it doesn't happen until after the first 2 have occurred. So here we go. There's the learn, there's the 4, all right. One more left to go, and that is the lifetime. So for the lifetime element, I have a keyframe set that looks very much like the first one. And it moves it, but it's moving it to the right and up. And it's also growing it. So it's changing that scale as it goes. So let's see how this looks. There we go, up and to the left, up, not as long, not as tall, and then, oh, and why is the keyframe not working? The keyframe is not working because I have not called the animation property. So the animation property, the first thing I want to call the right keyframe. I want to say how long I want it to last. I want it the timing function if I don't want the default, and how long I want it to wait, what delay. I want it to wait the 4 seconds so it comes after the other ones are done. All right, now that we've used that animation property, call it. There's the learn goes up and left, the for and then the lifetime goes up there and stops. All right, so notice that I stopped its progress. I wanted it to stay right here. And so if it's in this position, now what I want it to do is I want it to rotate. So between 60 and 80%, I want it to rotate to 360 degrees. Now if I do this and I refresh, it goes up it goes up here and changes to 360 degrees. Remember that when we go 360 degrees, it's all the way around. We don't see that transition. So I can add, so I want to put something in between so we actually see the rotation. So I'm going to go back where I want the rotation to start, and I'll put that in that 60%, and I'll go ahead and add a rotation, and I just want to just get it started. So I'm just going to put 1 degree, and we go over here and we refresh and we see the learn and then lifetime comes up, gets there, and we get to see that whole spin as it comes. One last thing I want to add is let's make it go really big, because notice that it goes away, right? It ends because when the animation is over, it goes back to that visibility hidden. So it just goes away. I want to make it great big before it goes away. So I'm going to put the scale to 8 and see what we come up with. All right, there we go. It's up and going and gets big and goes away. And the animation is done. Now, animations by default only happen one time. You can set them to happen multiple times. So for example, I could say, all right, well, I want learn to happen 2 times, and I want for to happen 3 times, and to happen 3 times, and I'll have this one. Notice this is just another property, another value on the animation property to happen 2 times. And I didn't change the timing, so there we go. The learn happens and it happens twice, and then for is already beginning and happening, and lifetime happens twice. So there we have lots of things happening. So you can repeat animations and have them happen more than one time. You can also set them to infinite, which is another one. And you know, it really, you have to be very cautious using animations in general, and for sure the infinite. I mean, just saying something's going to happen over and over again. Animations are fun to build. They're fun to try out and see how they work. They are not fun for a user. If you have some animation happening over and over and over again, it just simply becomes annoying to the person who's looking at your web page. Very distracting. So be very cautious. Have fun with animations, but don't use them much. You just don't want to use them very often. So you want to make sure you find that one specific time when they are useful and beneficial to a user. And often that certainly means when you do find to use them that you don't repeat them.